And now, the story that we're going to read, that we're going to hear, is from Ruth, chapter 1. So, in the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. A certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to live in the country of Moab with his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the names of their sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab, and they remained there. But the husband of Naomi, he died, and she was left with her 2 sons. The sons took Moabite wives. The name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth. When they had lived there for about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died. And so the women were left without the sons, without their husbands. She started to return with her daughters-in-law from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had considered his people and given them food. The famine was over. So she set out from the place where she had been living, she and her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on their way to go back to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you might find security, each of you in the house of your husband." And then she kissed them, and they wept aloud together. They said to her, "No, no, no, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why would you go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go on your way, for I am too old to have a husband. Even if I thought there was a hope for me, even if I should find a husband tonight and bear sons, would you then wait until they are grown? Would you then refrain from marrying? No, no, my daughters, it has been far more bitter for me than for you, because the hand of the Lord has turned against me." They wept aloud again. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. And so she said, "Look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after her." But Ruth said, "Do not press me to leave you, to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God shall be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do thus to me, and more as well, if even death parts me from you." When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. So the 2 of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they got there, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the woman said, "Is this Naomi? Is this her?" She said to them, "Call me no longer Naomi, but call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has dealt harshly with me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me?" So Naomi returned together with Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, who came back with her from the country of Moab. They came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. I want to first offer thanks to you for having me here with you this morning. As was so elegantly said, I am a student at Emmanuel College, and it's a joy for me to share space with various communities and learn from you and worship together. I've been deeply involved with Affirm United for a number of years and deeply entrenched in church world. I'm also a cat person, so you can talk to me about that later. I pray that my words land with you this morning the way that God intends them to. This story is very intense. Seeing some nods, yes. But I want to use this story and sort of pair it a little bit with a theme of pride that we saw in June and talk about the term queering. Now, this is a little bit complicated, sure, but specifically here, I'm talking about queering as a verb. So this is what I believe is going on in this story specifically. Whether Naomi and Ruth shared an intimate romantic relationship or not, some queer readings suggest that. The way that they remained steadfast and caring for one another, no matter their relationship, is a queer way of building community and chosen family. So I really like to play with the imaginary, so I'm going to invite you to come along with me. We're going to begin with setting the stage for the story. Naomi had moved with her husband and her 2 sons from Bethlehem in Judah to Moab because there was a famine. They needed to eat. Already we can imagine the grief that this family must have been experiencing, having to leave their home in order to survive. We can imagine what that journey would have been like. Did Naomi let her husband take a nap for a little bit while she took care of the sons during travel, and then they swapped? What did that look like? How did that journey go when they were navigating all of these feelings? After they moved, Naomi's husband died, and she was left to care for the 2 sons. We don't really hear how old the sons were when he died. We can imagine what that would have been like for Naomi as a widow with 2 sons. The sons both ended up marrying Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. We can imagine here now the familial system that was created. The women would have moved into their home and helped care for Naomi and the sons all together. Family systems were very, very integral to the culture of the time. About 10 years later, 10 years of the 5 of them together, the sons both die, and the 3 women are left alone. Naomi decides to take the 2 other women with her back to Judah. She'd heard that God had provided that there was famine no more. Now, this is a very, very heavy beginning to a story, right? Let alone the beginning of a book in the Bible. The first segment is packed with this whirlwind of grief and tragedy and somehow a little bit of hope. We see here that there is a family, that there's this community created here through the traditional family system first, but that outlasts single lives and into the strength of that community that they created. Let me explain. So Naomi and her husband first created a family by being married, and then by having children. They created this community, the 4 of them. They were a unit. They cared for one another. They traveled together. We can imagine they prayed and sang songs and had a life around the 4 of them. This family was then disrupted when Naomi's husband died, so she and her sons continued to build community. Her sons got married, and they continued to care for each other. We can imagine them sharing meals, sharing medicines. Perhaps the sons shared stories of their father and how he raised them, their father whom their wives would never meet, but they had memories of. Perhaps Naomi shared medicines passed down through the generations in her family from Judah that the Moabite women would never have known. Perhaps the daughters brought recipes from Moab that they learned from their mothers that Naomi never would have learned from hers. This was cultural exchange. These were exchanges of love that happened in the home. We can imagine that these 5 people were in loving and gracious community with each other, and how that must have held them through the grief, through the tragedy. Then, after about 10 years of them together, the men die. Naomi is officially left without any provider in the traditional family system. There's no more head of the household, and it appears in this moment that she is to be a poor widow, or perhaps even worse. It's looking pretty bleak. So she must have felt very afraid, perhaps even losing her hope, right? Her love, her children, they've all gone. And yet, somehow she hears in the fields that the famine in her home country is over, and there's a sliver of hope. There is a sliver of something to come for her. So she began the journey with her daughters-in-law back to Bethlehem. Now let's imagine some more. They're all grieving the loss of their loves. They've all lost a husband, their family. They're grieving the loss of the life they once knew. No more sitting around a packed table, saying prayers and singing songs. No more sharing memories of the boy's father. No more of any of that. The daughters-in-law now are traveling to a new country under the teaching and guidance of their mother-in-law. And this journey was probably not easy for 3 widowed women. And yet, they persisted anyways. Maybe this is where you see yourself in this story. Maybe you've been through something tragic and you're on your way to following your last hope, even if it seems far away and who knows how realistic. Maybe someone in your circle has experienced something absolutely devastating, and you're along for the ride because you cannot stand to see them do it alone. You don't know what you're doing, but you're there. This, right here, is what queering community can be and is about. Naomi then tries to push the 2 away, saying, Go home. Go back to your mother's house, she says. This is a very turbulent time in the story. The back and forth between the women and Naomi as she's wanting them to be cared for. She doesn't want them to face the difficulty that's going to come with being a widow in a new land. She knows that she's going to experience it, but she does not want them to. She's trying to care for them by sending them away. Naomi becomes firm on her decision to send these women back to their homes. She's being selfless here, perhaps more than she needs to be. However, Naomi is pushing, Ruth insists on going with her and not leaving her alone on this journey. Ruth's vow to Naomi is until death. Can anybody point where we usually hear this scripture? Weddings. Weddings. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die. And there I will be buried also. May the Lord do so to me and more, if anything but death parts me from you. Naomi and Ruth have both been through terrible tragedy and loss. Loss of their loves, the loss of their families, the loss of their unit, their home. There's a lot of turbulence between the women here, and this is a dramatic exchange, saying nothing that you can ever say or do or throw at me will make me leave. Ruth is saying, no matter how much you try to push me away, no matter what the world is going to throw at us, we will be together. We'll handle it together. We'll get through it somehow. And if we don't, well, we'll be buried in the same spot. The two of them go to Bethlehem. Naomi is now coming home decade at least after she had left. She went home in good faith after hearing that the famine was gone and acknowledges this greatness of God in her statements that she tells, despite being very, very bitter about all the tragedy that she's been through, all the suffering that she has experienced. So now I ask, have you ever become bitter because of suffering that you have experienced? I know I have. I have had quite a number of what the heck, God, kind of moments. Have you ever become bitter despite receiving maybe an unconditional or perhaps very intense showing of love from the people around you, from your chosen family? Have you said, you know what? No, go away. I'm going to deal with it. This is what this story is about to me. Our chosen family, our found family. And sometimes that's your family of origin. Sometimes that's the family that you come from, and sometimes that's not. A truly queer way of experiencing and moving through the world is this kind of family. It's separate from sexuality, it's separate from gender, it's separate from all of that. This is about love. This is about something that is in this vow that we heard. Personally, my chosen family has changed my life. They've revolutionized me and saved me more than I could possibly put into words. I'm disconnected from my family of origin, much like Naomi in this story, and perhaps Ruth also. But this family that I've found, we share a home, we share medicines, we share stories and songs, and it's a love that I've never fully understood. We're for sure connected to death. Being buried in the same spot, I don't know, but we're connected to death for sure, much like Ruth and Naomi. As people who are building communities, often this can look separate from and outside of the ideals that the world around us is trying to place on us. We can be outside of the heterosexual marriage with children format. We can be within that too. We strive to be outside of racist and classist systems that discriminate against most of the world. We strive to be outside of capitalist systems that value productivity and profit over care and compassion and friendship and reliability. This is queering community as a verb. This is what it means to care beyond what the social expectations are of you, beyond what the potential punishments might be, beyond what will bring you the most money or the most success. Love in a queer, expansive, kind of communal love is really exemplary in these stories that are of God's people, in these stories that influenced the world of Jesus. This is the kind of love that shapes us. It's what connects us all throughout time and space. This story between Ruth and Naomi reflects stories of love and friendship and kinship, I'm sure, that we can all imagine. Right? Again, we hear this at weddings. This is what we have put on the pedestal of what love means. This story certainly reflects my close relationships. And I imagine this may reflect some relationships that you have in your life, too. Perhaps with some of the people in this room with you, perhaps in your family, your friends, your neighbor down the hall. This is the love that is queering the system. And so I pray that you can go from this place and queer your relationships just a little bit. That you can bring a love like Ruth and Naomi and support each other despite what the system may say or do. May you experience a love and a support that brings you peace and pulls you from the bitterness that tragedy can pull us into. Amen.